The North Atlantic is a region that strikes with its harsh beauty and simultaneously frightens with its unpredictability. Here, on the vast expanses where icy waters meet the low gray sky, nature seems to test those who dare to challenge it. Every year, hundreds of vessels set out into these waters. Fishermen, researchers, travelers, but few of them are prepared for what the elements can unleash. Sudden changes in weather, enormous waves, and icy winds turn even the most reliable ships into toys in the hands of the raging ocean. One mistake, one wrong decision can cost lives. What makes a person stronger in the battle with nature? Preparation, intuition, or something deeper? The desire to survive for those waiting at home? This story will tell of the courage, resilience, and unity of those who found themselves on the edge of the possible. Prepare to learn what happens when a person encounters a force of nature that forgives no mistakes. North Atlantic, July 26, 2017. The time is approaching 3 a.m. But even at this late hour, the sky is enveloped in gray light. The proximity to the Arctic Circle creates a constant twilight glow. The sea here is restless. Icy wind tears at the waves, lifting them to the height of a 3-story building. And the rain lashes so hard that it seems to merge with the water itself. 265 nautical miles southwest of Iceland, amid these unpredictable waters, the Bravo sways, a 42-foot sailboat with a white hull, barely visible against the leaden horizon. The boat, built for speed rather than stability, is forced to battle the whims of the elements, which are becoming increasingly threatening. This is a place where nature dictates its own rules. In these waters, the cold doesn't just penetrate, it slows thoughts and paralyzes the body. Here, every mistake can be fatal. On board the sailboat Bravo are 3 people, each with their own experience, character, and reason for being here. Henry Landers, 62 years old, a former theater teacher, dreamed of a journey that would return him to his youthful memories of the sea. Retiring, he decided to fulfill a long-held dream, to test himself in a real adventure. For him, this voyage was not just a vacation but a challenge to himself, to prove something. Captain Jim, a 70-year-old sailor with many years of experience, was a man who trusted the sea but always remembered its treachery. His face, weathered by sea winds, reflected stories of numerous transatlantic crossings. He meticulously prepared the boat for the journey, convinced that caution was the key to survival. Sam, the youngest member of the crew, for whom this was a new world, compensated for his inexperience with persistence, a willingness to learn, and a sense of humor, thanks to which he quickly became part of the team. Despite the differences in age and experience, the team got along well. They shared a sense of adventure and respect for the sea, but each had their own fears. Jim worried whether he could handle the boat at such an advanced age. Sam was anxious that he might be the weak link, fearing not so much the sea as that his body might not withstand the trials. Preparation for the journey began a month before departure from Chesapeake Bay. Jim thoroughly checked all the equipment: sails, rigging, motor, radar, and communication system. Henry offered his help in purchasing supplies, canned food, water, medications, extra batteries for devices. The list included everything necessary for life on the water for a month. Before setting sail, the team discussed the route. The path was to go through Nova Scotia, Greenland, and Iceland, a challenging route requiring strict adherence to the schedule and an understanding that any delay could lead to unpredictable consequences. Henry didn't hide his excitement when he last called his wife. "I know everything will be fine," he said, trying to sound confident. She replied simply, "Come back home." Those words stuck with him for the entire journey. The experienced sailor insisted on a training outing at sea a few days before the start of the journey. This gave the team a chance to feel the boat, understand how it behaved in different winds, and rehearse joint actions. And so, on July 1st, 2017, the Bravo left Chesapeake Bay. At first, everything went according to plan. The sun shone, the wind filled the sails, and on the horizon, the lights of small fishing villages flickered. This was the beginning of a long and, as it seemed to them, exciting adventure. By the evening of July 25th, the weather began to change. At first, these were barely noticeable signs. A light breeze strengthened, clouds gathered on the horizon, and the sky became increasingly gray. The crew took it calmly, knowing that such changes are common in the North Atlantic. But closer to night, the waves began to rise higher. If during the day the Bravo gracefully glided over the crests, now the vessel began to dive between the waves. Henry, who was on watch, noted in the ship's log the increasing wind pressure and changes in barometer readings. On deck, the noise intensified. Water battered the sides, and each wave caused a dull thud below, as if the sea was trying to break inside. Jim, coming out on deck, carefully looked at the horizon. His face showed no alarm, but he told Henry to check if everything was securely fastened. Sam, meanwhile, calmed himself with jokes. "If we're washed overboard, you guys try to catch me first," he shouted. Henry laughed, but deep down he felt growing nervousness. Around midnight, the rain started. Fine drops quickly turned into a downpour that flooded the deck, limiting visibility. Fog covered the sea with a thick blanket, forcing the crew to rely only on radar. Each of them knew that if something unforeseen happened now, help would be unreachable. The situation escalated. That night, Henry, following the schedule, went out for another deck inspection. Strapped in, he climbed out of the cabin and felt the gust of icy wind. Waves hit the boat at a sharp angle, and it listed slightly but held. And then he heard that sound, a low, dull roar, as if the water itself came alive and warned of its fury. It was a sound impossible to mistake. A wave, an enormous wave. On the horizon rose a gigantic wall of water. Henry froze, realizing its size. It rose like a mountain, towering over the boat. All he could do was hold on. The wave crashed onto the Bravo with terrifying force. The impact was so powerful that the vessel capsized. Henry felt his body lift into the air, then crash with a loud thud against the hatch. Water poured through the broken portholes, instantly filling the cabin. In this chaos, the sound of shattering glass, creaking wooden panels, and the crew's cries overlapped with the roar of the raging ocean. For a few moments, everything went silent. Henry came to lying on the floor, feeling icy water pouring over his face. He tried to get up, but another wave impact threw him against the wall. The only thing he could think was, "This is the end. We won't get out." Fortunately, the boat somehow miraculously righted itself, returning to its normal position. But the Bravo's condition was dire. Water continued to pour in, the rigging was damaged, and the crew was in shock. Henry got up and looked out the porthole. Around was only cold darkness, and the waves seemed unwilling to calm down. At that moment, he realized they were in for a fight for survival. When Henry came to after the wave's impact, the first thing he heard was the roar of water filling the cabin. His life jacket activated automatically, lifting him above the icy stream. He jumped to his feet, clinging to the wall, and looked around. Everything that had been dry and orderly now turned into chaos. Wet mattresses floated along with books, clothes, food remnants, and equipment debris. Sam and Jim, finally awakened by the impact, waded through the water, trying to understand what had happened. Jim immediately began giving commands, his voice remaining calm though tension showed in his eyes. "Pump out the water quickly, to the pump," he shouted. Henry and Sam reached the emergency manual pump that the captain had foresightly installed for such situations. Henry knelt to start it, but saw that the pump's opening was clogged with debris. Scraps of paper, pieces of wood, and fabric scraps floated in the water. "I'll handle it," said Sam, and without hesitation, plunged his hand into the icy water. He used his fingers as a filter, pulling out the debris and allowing the pump to work. But it was a difficult task. Every couple of minutes, the pump clogged again, and the process had to start over. They took turns every 15 minutes to warm up a little. The cold seemed to pierce through to the bones. At that moment, Henry realized his fingers were starting to go numb. He wiped the sweat from his face, which mixed with seawater, and continued pumping. "Hold on," Jim said quietly, standing over them. He looked exhausted but wouldn't let himself lose heart. By morning, they managed to lower the water level a bit, But the situation remained critical. Water still flooded the boat through the broken portholes. The wind continued to toss the vessel from side to side, and the air and water temperature threatened not only health but life itself. Once the water inside the boat was pumped down to an acceptable level, Jim checked the electronics. Nothing worked. The GPS and radar were damaged, and the radio communication was out. The only means of communication left was the emergency radio beacon, known as the Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon. "We'll activate it, but it's unknown when help will come," said the captain, pressing the activation button. They knew that in the open ocean, the signal could only be picked up by a passing vessel nearby, and the search time could take hours or even days. Now they faced another problem: how not to freeze. Their clothes were completely soaked, quickly drawing the remaining heat from their bodies. Henry shivered, unable to cope with the cold. "We need to take this all off," Sam said unexpectedly, pointing to the cotton sweatshirts soaked with water. "Take it off." Henry was surprised. "Yes, cotton holds water. We need to use only synthetics. It at least warms a bit even when wet," explained Sam. They began removing the wet layers of clothing, wringing out the synthetic items and putting them back on. It was painful. Hands wouldn't obey, and the cold air burned the skin. Sam found pieces of a rubber mattress and suggested using them as insulation for the windows. The mattress was cut into strips and used to seal the porthole openings. This reduced the influx of cold air and slightly improved the situation. When the team finally coped with the first tasks, they were left alone with their thoughts. Henry sat on the ladder leading to the deck and thought about his family. It was hard for him to believe that he might never see them again. "If we don't get out, what will Fred say?" flashed through his mind. It was his friend Fred who had sent that very letter suggesting this journey. Henry couldn't imagine how he would blame himself for what happened. Jim was in another part of the boat, silently assessing the situation. He was a veteran of sea adventures, but for the first time felt he was losing control. Sam, who had previously tried to maintain team spirit with jokes, now also withdrew into himself. Each of them fought not only the physical threat but also internal fear. It was at that moment that an engine sound rang out in the distance. It was an airplane. Hope flared like a spark in the hearts of all three. They immediately launched a signal flare. However, the airplane couldn't find the boat for a long time. Its white hull blended with the color of the waves. Only after the second flare did the pilot spot the Bravo and confirm their location. It was a small victory, but the team knew the struggle was not over. The rescue ship, a massive research vessel, appeared on the horizon several hours after the airplane pilot transmitted the Bravo's coordinates. It was a huge ship, 220 feet long, built for work in the harsh conditions of the North Atlantic. In comparison, the small sailboat seemed like a tiny dot drifting in the raging ocean. Henry, Jim, and Sam climbed onto the deck to spot the rescuers. Seeing the approaching ship was both a relief and a new challenge. Approaching the Bravo in such conditions was deadly dangerous. Waves lifted the vessel tens of feet up and then dropped it sharply, and any wrong move could lead to a collision. The captain of the research vessel reported over the radio that his team couldn't come right up close. "We'll drop you a rescue raft, and you have to get to it and board it yourselves," said the voice on the radio. When the raft was dropped into the water, it began to sway on the waves, hitting the sides of the Bravo. The team understood that descending into this unstable structure might be even more dangerous than staying on the damaged boat. But there was no choice. Gathering their remaining strength, Henry was the first to step over the side and found himself in the raft. Each wave tossed him from side to side, forcing him to cling to the handrails to avoid falling out. Jim and Sam began rowing, trying to move the raft away from the Bravo, which now became a threat. Each wave impact could throw them back onto the dying vessel. When they finally approached the research vessel, a rope ladder dangled from it. It swung from side to side. Gusts of wind and rain turned the climb into an almost impossible task. Henry went first again. He gripped the ladder with both hands, feeling the icy wind creep under his wet clothes. Each step was a battle. Legs slipped, hands barely held, and rising waves threatened to throw him back into the water. "You can do it!" someone shouted from above. Henry didn't remember exactly how he reached the deck. The only thing that remained in his memory was the sound when his hands finally grabbed the metal pipe at the top, and the warm hands of the rescuers pulled him inside. When Jim and Sam reached the top, using safety harnesses, all three collapsed on the deck, exhausted but alive. The research vessel became their refuge. The crew greeted them warmly, despite the harsh conditions. The rescuers immediately brought dry clothes, hot tea, and blankets. For Henry, this was the first sip of warmth in the last day, and he could barely hold the mug in his hands. His fingers still trembled from the cold. The research vessel's crew shared food and told about their mission. They were studying whale migrations in the North Atlantic. These few days on board became an unexpected adventure for Henry and his team. The scientists were friendly, listened with interest to the Bravo's story, and helped them restore their strength. After 2 days, the vessel delivered them to the fishing port of Grindavik in Iceland. Local authorities, learning of the incident, helped the crew contact their families. On the pier, reporters awaited them, wanting to learn the details of this dramatic story. Henry, Jim, and Sam looked tired but happy. Returning home, Henry realized how valuable every moment of life is. His family, who had worried so much, greeted him with tears. He told this story to friends and acquaintances but never tried to make it into something heroic. We survived because we worked together. It was a lesson that preparation, self-control, and a bit of luck can save even in the most difficult situations, he said in one interview. Over time, Henry, together with his wife, bought a small yacht. Now his journeys are on calmer waters of the Chesapeake Bay. Jim and Sam remained friends for life. They rarely met, but each meeting reminded them of how they fought shoulder to shoulder. I always thought such trials happened to someone else, not to you. But when you survive, you understand that every morning, every embrace from family, that's what it's worth living for, said Henry, reflecting on his experience. The story of the Bravo crew is a reminder that the sea forgives no carelessness. Their survival became possible thanks to experience, cohesion, and enormous willpower. However, every year, hundreds of people become victims of natural disasters on the water. According to data from the International Maritime Organization, more than 75% of accidents in the ocean occur due to human errors, insufficient preparation, ignoring weather conditions, or incorrect risk assessment. If you like this story, give it a like and share it with friends. Perhaps your interest will inspire someone to prepare better or even reconsider their plans before an important journey. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new stories that not only take your breath away, but also teach you to be ready for any trials. Take care of yourself, prepare for the unexpected, and remember, nature can be not only beautiful but also merciless. See you in the next episode.